Warning: the following podcast features views and opinions that are likely to trigger the extreme fanboys and fangirls who disagree with them. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back, everybody. Season 3 rolling along here, and I'm excited for this one. This is going to be an interesting one because it's not one that you would think we do on the show, because when you talk about this movie, a lot of times people are like, I think I saw that one. I don't know. But with me today, I have had Chris Schrader from the Hey Do You Remember podcast, and now I have another member of the Hey Do You Remember family coming on. I love you guys so much. It's Carlos Freytes. Carlos, thanks so much, man, for coming on the show.
Oh man, it's a pleasure, and thank you for loving us. We love you too.
It's so funny because I feel like the three of you have such a great dynamic, and I feel like your role, to me at least, is you really seem like the screenplay architect. Like, you are very good at breaking down kind of choices that don't work, or maybe could have gone zigged when they should have zagged. I feel like you understand plot structure, which today's movie is going to be a little all over the place.
Yeah, this movie might test the limits of my plot structure doctoring. Well, that's really nice of you to say. I've actually learned a lot just from talking to Chris about what works and what doesn't. But I do feel like my talent is I am really good at being able to play with other people's toys. So when I watch a movie, I'd be like, oh yeah, maybe next time you should have done maybe that. And maybe that would have worked a little bit better. Maybe that would have been more interesting.
Well, playing with other people's toys is the best way to put it, because that's kind of what happened here. Of course, we're talking about 2004's Ocean's 12, the sequel to 2001's Ocean's 11, and the predecessor to Ocean's 13 and 8. 8, by the way, that could be its whole other episode. Wow, what a weird, this whole franchise. I gotta say, I have immense love for this entire franchise, 11 through 13 through 8, however you can numerically assign all of this. I love this franchise, but it's a strange franchise. I don't think, like, sometimes you can go to like a Star Wars or Back to the Future or something. There's always like a through line. If you watch them all, there's kind of a through line. That does not exist in the Ocean's universe. It is very much kind of, to quote Fight Club, it's kind of like the single serving experience. It's like each one is like, this is what it is. Have fun while it's, for the next 2 hours, because the next one's probably not going to be like this.
I would totally agree with that. And also, this is one of the rare films that like asks you to just kind of relax and let this movie happen. And the stakes they seem high, but no one in the film seems to think they're that high. So just sit back, watch some movie stars be movie stars. And by the way, it's Steven Soderbergh, so it's going to be worth it.
It's kind of the spiritual predecessor of Hobbs and Shaw, where it's like, yeah, there are stakes, but it's fine. Don't worry about it. We all know everything's fine. So let's go back in time just a little bit. Ocean's 11, obviously a massive hit at the time. I would venture to say Ocean's 11, for my money, might be the most rewatchable movie. There's never a mood that I'm in where Ocean's 11 doesn't sound good.
Oh, that's absolutely true. I was homesick from school the first time I saw Ocean's 11, and I just rented it from Blockbuster with like probably 50 other movies, and it was the one I kept coming back to during my 3-day rental.
Yeah, it's definitely like, it's, if it's ever on TNT, and even if I catch it in the middle, it's like, well, I gotta just at least see it through at this point. Or I'll be like, I'll watch 5 minutes and then keep cleaning the house. And then I always get sucked in, even though I know exactly what's going to happen every time. And I feel like a lot of people absolutely love Ocean's 11. I've never heard someone be like, nope, not for me. So expectations were very high going into Ocean's 12, to the point where, I don't know about you, I remember when they announced Ocean's 12, I thought, that's interesting. I just never in my mind thought they would do another one. I thought that was kind of like a wham bam, thank you ma'am, and that's what it was. What were your thoughts going into Ocean's 12?
I don't think it had ever occurred to me that they would make a franchise out of it. But I remember just being very excited because I had so much fun watching 11. So I just thought, okay, 12, they wouldn't have come back to it unless they wanted to, because none of the celebrities in this film needed Ocean's 12. Like they all blew up.
But I would say none of them needed Ocean's 11.
Yeah. Okay,
maybe Bernie Mac
totally,
at the time, because
totally
Bernie Mac like just had his show. I think his TV show came out right after Ocean's 11. So it's but other than that, that was just kind of like, want to see what Hollywood stars look like. It was like a good Adam Sandler movie where it's just like, want to see some friends hang out? You're like, yeah.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So Ocean's 12, yeah, kind of a surprise that they were doing it, but a welcome surprise. I was very happy. Turns out that, they had some ideas. Steven Soderbergh had some ideas, but they weren't really nailing it. Then this script comes along from George Nolfi, who would later go on to write some other Matt Damon movies. I think he did Bourne Ultimatum, Adjustment Bureau, and it was called Honor Amongst Thieves. And this was going to be a John Woo movie about two thieves trying to kind of one-up each other. It got into the hands of Jerry Weintraub, who was the producer of the Ocean's movies, and he thought, you know what? I think with a little bit of tinkering, this could be an Ocean's trilogy or Ocean's sequel. And I kind of think that's where, look, obviously, if I'm doing this episode, that means I love this movie. I already said I love this movie, but I feel like I love this movie in spite of itself. This is a movie I enjoy despite all of its efforts to make me not want to like it. But I do feel like this was kind of where the tonal shift, because I do feel there's a tonal shift between 12 and 11. And I kind of feel like once, if you watch the movie, you're like, something feels weird. I don't know what it is. And then someone says, oh, well, it was another script that they just put these character in. Then it clicks for me, like, oh yeah, this does kind of feel like the Ocean's crew kind of stole another script or hijacked someone else's movie.
I've always loved the moment where Danny and Rusty are standing in the bridge in Amsterdam and they're talking about how hard this heist is going to be to steal like the first stock ever. And Danny says to Rusty, like, we're forcing it. And Rusty's like, yeah, we're forcing it. And to me, that is just, it's a meta commentary on, like, we're forcing this franchise into this script.
That's such a great example. But I mean, that's almost like the charm of these movies in general, is because it's like, I was saying to you earlier, there are so many things now that want to be cool, that want to be the definition of cool. So to genuinely organically manufacture cool is, in my estimation, like the hardest thing that you can do. So this movie, while it makes almost no sense on its face, just oozes so much cool. Not even just the cast. I'm talking about like Soderbergh's choice to go really, like Italian and European with the soundtrack and the way it's shot. It just looks so different than Ocean's 11.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree with that. I remember seeing it really before I had a film vocabulary, and just I remember like there's a sequence where everyone's being brought out in handcuffs, and Soderbergh takes the time to zoom in on every single member of the crew being brought out in handcuffs, and I was like, that just feels European, and I couldn't really say why. I was like, I just feel like that's like something you would see in a European film, and I feel like that's what Soderbergh was kind of doing the whole film, was just making like, he's making his French New Wave film, and I dig it. So let's get into the things that I really like about this movie, because it's inevitable. We're going to have to get to some of the shortcomings of this movie. It's just going to happen. But one of the things that I really like about this movie is when you have this many stars, and make no bones about it, they were movie stars in Ocean's 11. But after Ocean's 11, some of the, I'll call them the B team of the Ocean's 11, even their stocks rose a little bit. I mean, like, Casey Affleck was, I would say, certainly more famous in 2004 than he was in 2001. And I kind of feel like I love that this movie
brought the team together. I think actually one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie is they're in one of the very cramped hotel rooms trying to plan that heist for the stock, and it's just it devolves into like you joking with your friends where he's like, can we not use the word freak? And Elliot Gould's like, what are you hosting, a Telethon we don't know about? Like, I could watch a scene of that, of them just sitting around talking about doing something for 2 hours, which is insane because, you know, normally you're like, I want to see the action. Where's the action? It's a movie. I should see it. But watching them plan it and talk amongst themselves are some of the best parts of this movie.
Even the part of the film where they're learning the stakes, they're learning how much they owe to Terry, and that whole, they're all in a room, they're like in some random factory warehouse or something, and they're like, I just cannot believe he referred to us as Ocean's 11. We agreed to call it the Benedict job. And they cut to Rusty, and he's just smiling from ear to ear. And because this is fun. This is just fun.
Yeah, I I love that Rusty also, like, it's so great that you learn so much about these characters, even just jumping back into it. Again, like, they were kind of props in the first one in the sense like, oh, that's Matt Damon. Oh, that's Brad Pitt. It to me in the first one, it's not really Rusty. It's not really Linus. Mm-hmm. But the whole first part of this movie where you found out how they spent their money, I feel is like the first true character development for 90% of that cast.
I would totally agree with that. And I was thinking about that when I saw the scene with Rusty and Danny on the bridge. I was like, this is the most, like, the deepest these characters are going to get, at least for the first two movies. I don't quite remember Ocean's 13 having well, I guess there are some heartfelt moments in that, but yeah, the moment on the bridge where Rusty and Danny are kind of having a heart-to-heart about how it's so hard to go straight and how Danny's always looking for the angles every time he walks into a room, and like that's all stuff that's like, that is not there in the first film.
I also kind of love like the little details, like seeing what his life with Tess must have been like, especially when it's just like he's Miguel Diaz, and then, you know, like Danny, I think Benedict's here, he's like, the pilot lights out and the water's flooding, you know, just like, yeah, even like you could never feel secure. But that's where I said, like, tonally this movie feels a little weird, because you get to that scene and it feels very tense and he's running away and he's on this train and it's shot very dramatically, and then you get to that warehouse and immediately it's like, no, you said this was called Ocean's 11. I never. And you're like, wait a minute, are we all fearing for our lives because one of you had your car blown up and the other had your best man speech interrupted? You know, like, tonally this movie is just like kind of all over the place, but it kind of works.
Even in the scene where that sequence where everyone is learning that Terry knows where they are, like the Carl Reiner bit where his card has been declined and he's like, oh, Mr. Benedict, oh, Terry, like, and you can see like he's going through like, this is hilarious and Terry Benedict is going to kill me. Like, it's juggling those, but I think it's doing a perfect job of it.
Also, one of my favorite jokes in the movie was, again, Elliot Gould, I think, has some of the most underrated lines where he's at the fortune teller. He's like, this? You couldn't see this? Which is just what I always think with those stupid fortune tellers. And it's like great, perfect. I love. Also, he has like a really weird. Again, this is why I say like this movie feels more like an Adam Sandler movie in terms of like they just filmed pals palling around, because there's like that really weird cut that makes no sense why it's there, but sure, keep it in, where he's like, open the bathroom, and he's like, would you like it if you were sitting on the toilet, someone's pounding the bathroom? He's like, I'm gonna on your shoes if I don't. Like, why is that in the movie?
And
like,
just, other it's than in the movie because fun. You totally see that the other actors are laughing because that was an ad lib, like, right. and they're just, and it just adds to the fun.
I fun is the key word here, and I think the character that actually has the most fun. Now, what's interesting is, so before they were going into production, Matt Damon had just come off a Bourne movie. I think he just had another action-y movie too, and he's like, guys, I'm exhausted. I will do Ocean's 12, but can you have me kind of be kind of like the Saul role, where Saul only comes in towards the third act, and they were like, no, we're not going to do that. Actually, you're going to have a way bigger role. And I think Linus ends up kind of stealing this movie. They, in Ocean's 11, I don't get quite a read on Linus, because at least the first half of Ocean's 11, he still has a very tough exterior. He's still kind of like cool and just like smash and grab, sure, whatever.
Right.
But by this movie, I think whether it was the writing or it was a choice of his or a combination of the both, he leans into like he's a dork, and he kind of knows he's a dork, and everyone knows he's a dork. And I feel like he's the only one on the team that isn't trying to be cool, which makes him his own brand of like funny and cool.
I would totally agree with that. Like his energy in 12 is like it's almost like an intern or like a page or something. He's trying to move up, and like the scene where Rusty and Danny and Matsui are just like messing with him, and he recites the lyrics to Kashmir like and it's because he's so easy to pick on, because he wants this so badly, so earnestly.
Yeah, I didn't even know Matt Damon was really that funny. Like, I guess at that point, I've since seen him do some really funny stuff, but like, I just love too, like it also by him, like sacrificing, I guess, being like as cool as Danny or as cool as Rusty. It makes Danny and Rusty cooler, especially Rusty. Whenever it's Linus and Rusty, especially in this movie, that's where I feel like, man, that's where this shines. When he's like trying to talk to him on the airplane, and he's just so excited. He's like, I almost didn't come talk to you. And Rusty's like, then I'd still be sleeping. Like it informs more of the characters, which I love. They also did this thing in this movie, even though he didn't have as big of a part. They did try to make it seem like Bernie Mac's character Frank was a bigger deal, or he was kind of higher up the food chain than he maybe was in the last movie. I don't know if that's because Bernie Mac himself was more popular at that time.
Yeah, he gets the high profile of like, Interpol knows who Frank is in Ocean's 12, whereas
right.
in Ocean's 11 he could just get a job at a casino, even though he was probably on some blacklists.
Yeah, it's interesting, like I said, kind of seeing how the stars had changed a little bit. Let's get a little bit into the screenplay, and this is where it's going to get a little messy, but let's dig into it a little bit. The reason why Ocean's 12, I was trying to think, like, I've watched it so many times, but watching it recently, knowing we were going to talk about it, it's like, what is it about this movie that kind of just like feels off the whole, and doesn't feel as like satisfying? It's fun, but it doesn't feel as satisfying. And I think it's because this movie's whole kind of the runner in this movie is like, let's undo everything. Even, the kind of the mission statement of this movie is all the money that they stole, that they had, is now going to be gone from them. And then, all of the things that they go for in this movie, they kind of pull a Prince of Persia, and it doesn't matter at the end.
Right.
Nothing that you watched meant anything at all. I can totally see how that is frustrating, and probably to me still is a little bit frustrating. It's just, I don't know why they thought it was a good idea to tell you at the very end that everything you watched while you were watching it actively was just BS.
Honestly, it's the one thing from this film that doesn't sit well with me to this day. Is it's like the worst version of It Was All a Dream.
Right. Yeah. It totally
because then
is.
you have to go back and watch and go, wait, they know they're being watched here. So this moment here where he's by himself, now he's acting for someone else. Like it's very, very frustrating. But only that twist, honestly. Like everything else I've kind of buy, like the Julia Roberts pretending to be Julia Roberts, or the Night Fox doing the breakdancing to get around the lasers and all of that. Like I all am able to go with, but it's none of this was real. We were putting on a show for you, and really they mean for us, not not the Night Fox. It just that to me, I wish that there was another way out of that.
Okay, I'm going to put the car in reverse here because there's something that you said, and that is the second thing that drives me nuts about this movie. And most people, I think this is probably the most divisive and also the most remembered part of this movie. I do not like the Julia Roberts gag. I can't get into it. I think that is the only time, I kind of always know, like you said, with the meta, like we're forcing this. This movie is constantly winking at you, constantly. This was like overtly opening and shutting its eyes. I'm like, okay, I get it. This is dumb, but like who would buy this? And then calling and Julia's picking up the phone. I don't know. It's just, that's the one part where I'm like, okay, you guys took a step too far. Like I was with you with everything. And then now you're kind of like, I'm in on the joke, but don't explain the joke to me because then it's not funny anymore. If that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. And I don't begrudge anyone who can't buy into that sequence. For me, it's like, it's the guy at the museum who hangs up the phone and like says in was it Italian? What language is he speaking? Italian? Where he's just like, Julia Roberts is coming.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. This is just like how like American I am. I'm like, yeah, it's all Europe. It's somewhere in Europe.
He's speaking European.
They said Amsterdam once in the movie, so I'm just going to assume it all takes place there.
But just the idea that like, I was like, wow, they're really going for this. And like, it's, to me, because it's Linus, because he's nervous, and because it's being like, Tess is being shuffled along, and she's like, wait, what am I doing? And then the Bruce Willis cameo, where I think he's hilarious in it. I think he's really funny in it. To me, it just like, it all works. It was a real risk, and like I said, it definitely does not work for everyone. It totally works for me. I think it's hilarious.
I guess that's another one where, like, if you really, once the movie's over, the movie just wants you to feel a certain way and maybe not stop and think about what you just watched. Because the Julia Roberts Tess one is the only one where I'm like, why did Danny need Tess there? They only would have pulled that if he told Linus beforehand, like, hey, I'm going to get caught. Then you need to seem like, you need to bring Tess over as if this is your final plot. But why?
Yeah, no, don't. Yeah, you definitely shouldn't think about it.
I'm watching the wheels turn on you right now, and you're like,
because they needed to make it seem like they got caught trying to steal the egg.
Which they were well on their way, like
yes, right.
if they needed to get caught, just stay in line, as they started picking them off, I
also see, okay, part of me wonders if the whole reason they brought in Tess was because if they didn't bring in Tess, they didn't have 12.
That's...
Is it like, she's our 12th?
But then doesn't that... okay, this is where it gets, like, obnoxious, because... Yes, you're right. But then it's like, okay, when we get to Ocean's 13 and she's not in it, now you need to add 2 people. So are we adding like Roman Nagel and Terry Benedict? Or it's like...
Right. Yes. 13 definitely includes Terry as part of the equation. I think the 13th is all the friends we made along the way.
It's you and me at home.
Yeah, exactly.
Or it's like, is Catherine Zeta-Jones the 12th because she kind of joins them at the end? I don't know. Who knows? I don't think they want you to actually count. But one thing that I do like a lot, it was the other thing that you said, which is I do love Francois Toulour, the Night Fox. Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that I wished Ocean's 11 had, but I understand it wouldn't have made any sense, so it couldn't. Terry never seemed like he was quite on the level of Danny. There were times where he got close, and certainly like it was clever of him to realize that, the floors had changed, but it never felt like 2 masters going back and forth. It felt like a guy who probably realized, and even towards the end, he doesn't 100%, like he never would have let Danny go if he really knew the extent of how much Danny was involved. So then when you have the Night Fox, you now pit Danny and his crew against someone that is equal, that's on their level. And I think that's like, if I'm doing a sequel to Ocean's 11, that is kind of the most natural plot point I'm going to go for is, well, who are the anti-Ocean's 11? Who is their biggest rival? And it's not Terry.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I thought after coming out of Ocean's 12, I just kind of thought Ocean's 13 was going to be the Night Fox steals all of the money from Ocean's 11 and Ocean's 12, and now Terry teams up with the 11 to go get the Night Fox and probably his team, the Night Fox
so funny.
11.
I thought Ocean's 13 was going to be somehow they had to convince the Night Fox to join them because he was the only one that could do some crazy, I don't know, another jig or shuffle across a laser floor, something. He has I mean, that's the thing. It's like the thing that makes the Night Fox so cool is he embodies the skills of the 11 in one person. He is his own grease man. He is his own tech guy. He plans his own stuff. He does his own demolition. And I think that there would be something interesting about joining up against him and maybe leaving Terry out of the third one. But again, what can you do?
Yeah, he is legitimately the greatest thief in the world, which is why I think the sequence where you see him dodging the lasers to get the egg, it's so impressive because he actually did the work, and you see him earlier in the film doing like training for that, and it's something he couldn't have planned for. He had to be great in the moment. He is reacting to random lasers, and I think they put that all there to be like, yeah, it doesn't matter that he's the best. Like, because he didn't have the upper hand even just going into this.
We got another new addition to this cast, which was Isabel, Catherine Zeta-Jones. It's funny when I remember walking out of this movie and I was like, I wasn't crazy about her. But subsequently, I'm like, I actually really like that character a lot. I think she's a great foil to Rusty, which is, you know, you have to think like Rusty needs someone that's kind of his at least intellectual equal.
Yes, and I think that kind of turning the tables, whereas in Ocean's 11 it was Danny secretly planning with Tess in mind. Now you've got Rusty planning for Isabel the whole time, and accounting for her to be part of this all for the end game here, where she is going to meet her father. I actually I like all of their moments together. I like the fact that like the moment where Rusty opens the door and she like makes half the team like in one swoop, right. And like where she steals the phone. I love the freeze frame on Rusty where he's like he realizes the phone is gone.
Oh, that should be way more memed than it is. That should be a classic meme that you go to is Rusty realizing his phone is gone.
That moment is fantastic. Like, I love that face that he's making. But then again, it's like, okay, is he making this face for us or the Night Fox, who isn't even in the story yet?
I guess that's where the script gets maddening, because it's like, I still am of the impression that was still not part of he never wanted the Night Fox. Like, that wasn't a play. Like, that was, that actually happened. Because it just seems like, and look, I'm being a real, a-hole about this script in the sense of like, Ocean's 11 could never so many things had to have happened the way they happened in order for that to work, that it's like, well, you could never plan for any of that. I just think it goes like double here, because not only now are you trying to dupe, the Night Fox, which essentially is us. So you're planning now like two heists, but then you throw a third person in there, which is Isabel. Either she really did get the better of them, which is what I think, and just, they couldn't prepare, or they were planning essentially three different parts of a plan. It just starts to like break down into madness. I feel like this is how you get put into an insane asylum. And
I'm not normally one for like, you just got to turn your brain off. Like, that's not me. As anyone who's listened to the podcast I do, that is not me. I will not grant that to movies. For this, like, because they were retrofitting this franchise into this script, some of this is like, it's just not going to make 100% sense. And maybe it's great that it's set in Europe, because European films often don't make 100%, total sense all the time. You just gotta be like, yeah, they're in love. That's all that matters.
David Lynch's Ocean's 12.
Oh boy.
Yeah, look, I think that's the thing about Catherine Zeta-Jones. I actually think her character represents like the best parts and the worst parts of this movie, where I think, I love that she's kind of such a great foil at the other end of the coin. I think the whole thing with her dad being the master villain or the master thief, like Lamarck, it was kind of like, okay. Like,
Yeah,
it was a little melodramatic. Right. I was like, all right, sure. Why not? Yeah. We've only seen this guy once. So it didn't hit as hard as they wanted us to think that it was going to hit. But by that point, the emotional, it's so strange. And I don't know if like Soderbergh realized this or it was planned this way. The emotional payoff of this movie is not the reunion with this long lost father. It's the friends having fun at a card game as we go into the end credits. Like,
that's absolutely right. Like, that's the scene that I was like, I could watch this forever.
Yeah, like show me the Blu-ray outtake of just the 2 hours of them actually playing cards. That's like the emotional payoff of like, okay, now we're all back together again. No one's hunting us. I'm still confused by the terms of the bet. So does that mean that Lamarck... Okay, so Lamarck's... well, I'm trying to think like, did they just lose all the money that they stole from the first one? Are they just now just happy to be alive and that negates all the work they did in the first movie? Or does Toulour pay the debt and then they also get to keep the money that they already had?
That is unclear to me now. When now thinking about it, I think that they,
because if they lost the money that they got in the last movie too, then this movie's like a double bummer because this movie didn't count and it negates the last one.
They don't get them. Okay, so they miss their deadline, but only to have their debt paid. So yeah, I think they're out of all of their money, but I think that they're in a much happier place because of it. Because if you see them at the beginning of the film where they're counting their debt, they're all bummed. Like, they're like, yeah, this has not been great having all this money. The hotel business sucks, and like living in suburban, America sucks, and picking out what, how oxblood our paint is going to be sucks. So, I think they enjoy living for the next heist.
I kind of loved seeing though Yen being like this, like Mac Daddy, just just completely not what you would think based on him from the first movie. That was kind of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It seemed like for the most part, Basher is like this record producer and he's not happy with it. And Livingston Dell is like still living with his mom, I guess, I don't know. It's just strange. That's not where I thought we would have picked up the threads of most of those characters. Rusty's makes sense. Rusty's actually really makes sense, and I love that Topher Grace is in there again.
Yes,
looking like a jet. It's the runner that I wish they would have kept for Ocean's 13, but they didn't.
I agree. I love it's like this Kabbalic crap doesn't even work.
Yeah, I love that whole bit. Also, he doesn't factor in this movie as much, but the addition of Eddie Izzard as Nagel, who has a much bigger part in Ocean's 13. I really like that character. I feel like they didn't quite. They're like, I know they originally went out to Ricky Gervais and he said no. He was like, why would I do a couple of lines against Brad Pitt when I can go like star in my own movie at home? And they're like,
sure,
okay,
yeah.
So Eddie Izzard joined the cast in this one. Doesn't have a lot to do. I think he only has like 1 or 2 scenes, but the next one he has such a more expanded role. I really like that they added him again. That could, I think he might be part of the 13 in the next one.
Yeah, we should
need like
not
a
do
chart.
The math. Yeah,
we need like a chart. Who counts?
He's only in half the film, but he's in the other half of the film. Therefore, 13.
Yeah. So this movie, it actually did fairly well at the box office. It came out, it was the 10th highest grossing film of 2004, $362 million. It was not a flop. It did, however, 55% it is literally kind of split down the middle with critics. And I honestly think it comes down to like, what do you watch a movie like this for? Because I think, you know, one of the reviews that I really love, it's a guy just said, it's a great inside joke film. And I'm like, yeah, kinda.
That's kind of what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, other criticisms, it's busier, it's messier, it's thinner, and it's not as fun. I don't disagree with any of that, but that's like saying like, you know, Disney's California Adventures is less fun than Disneyland. Sure, but I still like going. They're both still fun, you know?
Man, I don't even know. I think that Ocean's 12 is as fun as Ocean's 11, but it is messier and sloppier. Just from a story standpoint, from a filmmaking standpoint, I think it's as great. I mean, it's still Soderbergh, but I do think that I'm having as much fun. Like the bit where George Clooney is walking around asking everyone if he looks 50.
Right.
Like that's just funny. It's a funny bit because it's kind of meta. Like it was what was going on at the time that's kind of the whole film is, hey, you ever notice Tess kind of looks like, don't even say it. Like it's stuff like that I think it's really, really great.
I think one of the things, especially when you watch this movie with even including Ocean's 8, but if you watch it within the trilogy, it feels so different also because they groom you to get in the habit of Act 1 introduces the problem, Act 2 introduces how we're going to do this, and Act 3 is let's do it. Here's the heist. And 1 follows that. 13 definitely follows that to the point where 13 just like calls it out with a title card. It's like opening night at the hotel. 8 does that with the Met Gala. There's one thing that they want, and we're watching them go through all the hurdles in order to pull off that one job. This movie doesn't do that. If I had not watched it recently, and you know, it's like, what are they trying to get? Well, in the first one, they're trying to rob the hotel. What about the third one? They're trying to bankrupt the hotel. You know, with this one, it's like, what are they trying to get? I think they got a stock or a plaque or something, and then they went for some big jewelry later. Like, it's not clean, it's not clear, and I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. On its face, I think if you had put out Honor Amongst Thieves as a movie, a John Woo movie, and it was just two thieves going back and forth, I don't think that this script maybe would have gotten as big of a magnifying glass put on it as you do when you put it in the Ocean series.
Well, I wonder too if it was just the John Woo film, no oceans in it, how much cleaner is it? Like it probably is just a much more streamlined story, even though it's got a convoluted steal the stock in Act 1, steal the egg in Act 2. Because you're not having to also deal with 12 other cast members who have interpersonal relationships with each other, and you're building on that story, and you're building on the stakes of the last film. I bet that Honor Amongst Thieves would have just been like a pretty clean film, but it wouldn't have had peak Brad Pitt, peak George Clooney, you know, like it wouldn't have had the star power. It couldn't have had the star power of Ocean's 12 because every star was in Ocean's 12.
Yeah, it makes me wonder too, because Ocean's 12 is the only one of these that it's like, I feel the runtime of this one. By the time that we are getting to the zoomed in handcuff shots, I'm like, oh man, how much more of this we got? We good. Like this has been on for quite a while. And maybe, you know, it could just be because when you think about it, the other movies are very I don't want to say like constricted, but they are they're set in really one place. They're like in Vegas in a hotel, where this one we bounce all over the place. Clearly, you and I don't know exactly. They're European.
I honestly don't remember.
I remember Amsterdam only because it literally was a title card at one point.
Yes,
a
very stylish title card, which each letter for a different shot of Amsterdam.
Everything was stylish. I mean, that's the thing too. It's like this one sticks out like a sore thumb because they went. I think this one in a bad way, kind of scared Soderbergh off from trying anything radically different for Ocean's 13. I still love Ocean's 13, but of all the three, it feels the most manufactured from head to toe. The coolness feels a little bit more like we're trying a little bit harder, and even like the hotel. It's clearly like a soundstage, like an enormous, glorious, beautifully made soundstage, but it never feels like the Willie Banks Casino is a real hotel. So in a way, I kind of blame Ocean's 12 for kind of like he almost blew his creative load on this one. And they're like, hey, go watch Ocean's 11 again. And can you just like literally remake that as close as you can with it being slightly different?
I mean, I could totally see Warner Brothers being the ones who were scared off, just being like, look, Ocean's 11 was set in Vegas at a hotel. Ocean's 13 will be set in Vegas at a hotel.
And I'm sure the first thing was like, well, everyone now would be well aware of what they did, so we can't have them rob a bank again or rob a casino again. Yeah, I definitely think, because they actually started getting it ready, Ocean's 13, about 2 years after Ocean's 12. So it's not like this was like, ooh, we need to think if we're going to do another one. Like they knew they were going to do a third one, but I think they got cold feet. And I do think it kind of hurts the continuity, which is ridiculous. This is not the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it does kind of, in my mind, hurt the continuity that like Tess and Isabel just kind of like are just dropped. It's just like, yeah, they're not a part of this. And you're like, okay, well then glad we spent so much time getting to know Isabel in the last one.
Yeah. There's like a throwaway line in 13, like, no, this isn't Tess's fight. This is our fight. I'm like, okay.
Well, it's like, well, she knew him. Like it's,
Right, yeah.
She was literally one of your 12, maybe. We don't know.
Pretty sure she was at that poker game at the end of the last heist.
And again, I think that just boils down to like both of them were like, if we don't have big roles, we're not doing this. It's like, come on, guys, we're pushing it as it is. But I definitely think that Ocean's 12. It's funny because if someone's like, there have been people, believe it or not, look, you'll always be surprised if someone's like, I've never seen Titanic. I've never seen Wizard of Oz. There are many people that I know and love who still haven't seen any of these Ocean's movies. And a lot of times they'll watch Ocean's 11 and then they'll be like, oh, should I watch the others? I'm like, yeah, but no. Like, I don't know. Is Ocean's 12 a movie that you can recommend to someone?
I will recommend Ocean's 12 to people based on what they liked about Ocean's 11, because it's like, if you liked the idea that these people are friends and they're hanging out, you're gonna really love Ocean's 12. But if you were sitting there half an hour after Ocean's 11 trying to figure out how everything worked in the plot, don't touch Ocean's 12 with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, and again, like, not to crap on Ocean's 13, because I do really like that movie. That was another major correction that I feel is directly tied to Ocean's 12, which is an over explanation of every single thing that they do in that movie. Like that movie, you can walk out and you can like clearly write down like, oh, this is how everything broke down and what they had to do. Whereas Ocean's 11, it was kind of like, a pinch is not real. I mean, it is, right. But it not on that level. There's no way something like that could happen.
There was something that the screenwriters of Ocean's 11, like it had never been pointed out to them before, but there's this like glaring plot hole, and they're like, yeah, we don't have an explanation for that. And it was like, how did the bags of call girl postcards end up in the vault? And they were able to take bags of money out. Or there was something, I can't remember it now exactly, but there's something they're like, no one's ever brought that up before, but you're right. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean, I think kind of what makes these movies fun is just kind of like a heist or a magic trick. There's a lot of sleight of hand. A lot of sleight of hand that, makes you ooh and ah. Like, are you telling me it wasn't the coolest shot ever when the SWAT team was walking out and Brad Pitt lifts the thing up? You're like, oh yes, it is them. They got out. but the sleight of hand also that it's like, yeah, how did that all work out? How did that all? It's like, it's a magic trick.
You're right.
You don't go to a magic show. And then, well, my wife does that. I was like, bad example, because she will just like the whole car ride home, she'll just be Googling, trying to figure out how David Copperfield did whatever he just did for
amazing.
half an hour. And just like it's not fun to her unless she knows how it happened. So maybe I wouldn't recommend Ocean's 12 to her.
See, my wife's more of the David Blaine sold his soul to the devil. That's how we did it.
I mean, someone just being hungry for 2 months is not a magic trick. That is, that's just sad, and we need to, really look at our priorities.
It
in
really
life.
is a cry for help, really.
So yeah, Ocean's 12. Look, I don't think this is a movie that I can defend on its face. I think I'm with you, where it's like, sometimes, and I talk about this a lot because I feel like, and I don't blame Marvel, but I kind of blame Marvel. I think that we consume stories and media much differently now. I always use the example that if Back to the Future came out today, people would probably just crap all over it because they couldn't get past the fact, well, why is this teenager hanging out with this old man? It doesn't make sense. This movie is garbage. It's almost like everything has to interconnectedly explain everything else. And a lot of times people forget that like a movie sometimes only exists to create a feeling, to create an emotion, and will sacrifice, it's sometimes a little maybe logic, or maybe, like this plot thing it could never happen in real life, but the emotional payoff it's more satisfying. That's what film is. Watch a Richard Linklater movie. Those have no stories. They just want you to feel something, or to get your head inside a mood, inside a feeling. And as big of a leap as this is to say, I'm going to say it, I'm going to put these Ocean's movies more in the category of like a Richard Linklater movie. Like, I don't think you should walk into this movie thinking that you're going to get a fantastic story, because you're not, but you're going to get a feeling. I think if you're having like a bad day, or I think that if you're kind of feeling a little bit alienated, or just kind of feeling like sad for whatever reason, the Ocean's movies, all three of them, are great movies to kind of feel like you are a part of this little weird family. It's strange, but I like, jubilant is how I feel when I watch these movies. I feel happy, even though filmmaking wise, it's not the greatest stuff I've ever seen. It produces a feeling that I can't think of another set of movies that produce that kind of feeling.
I really think that these were the last movie star hangouts of Hollywood, and after this era, we get the event being bigger than the star. Like Fast and the Furious, there's a million of those movies, obviously, but there's a million people in those movies, but it's really just like Vin Diesel in cars, and that's really, the cars are more the star than the 14th lead of Fast and the Furious. I think these films was just like, yeah, we're just gonna watch some movie stars be movie stars for a few hours. And I mean, really, short of like in this era, like maybe Ben Affleck and Leonardo DiCaprio, I think they pretty much got every major movie star in Hollywood to be in these films. I think from a storytelling standpoint, I don't mind the sleight of hand with the Ocean's series. I dig it in Ocean's 11. Ocean's 12, the only issue is that there's a difference between a sleight of hand and what they do in the final twist, saying all of this was an act. But it could have been prevented, or at least it could have been redeemed, if at the beginning of the film we were given some promise or some hint that is something that could happen. Because then at the end you'd be like, oh yeah, okay, they did kind of set that up. All right, that was there. Like, the idea, again, back to the scene where they're messing with Linus in front of Matsui, is like, if you watch that scene again, Matsui is very much like looking around, like laughing to Rusty and Danny, like, let's get them, like, we're gonna go. And And so in the moment you're like, oh, that was a weird, dialogue. I wonder what that code was. But you go back and go, oh no, they are just messing with him. That's all they're doing. If you were able to go back and watch Ocean's 12 and go, oh, okay, this is the moment where they are basically telling us without telling us that the rest of this is going to be a charade, then I think we would forgive that more. But that being said, I don't watch it for that. I watch this movie for, Elliot Gould being like, who's on the 100? And all, the rest of the gang all says a different president who is not Benjamin Franklin. The first name you hear is Adams. Like, Adams? That's what I watch it for. That's what I'm watching that movie for.
You made me think like, oh man, what a missed opportunity that they didn't get in an Ocean's 14 with Ben and Leo. Because I don't think you can do... I think you can certainly, and I hope they do an Ocean's 9, which is also weird because now they have limited themselves. Like, they have 3 movies and then that's it. The numbering does not support. Can
I pitch my Reboot It real quick?
Oh, please.
Okay. I think there is a tremendous opportunity to do a heist film set in the 80s with a different crew altogether, and their version of Linus, their rookie, is Danny Ocean. And you call it Ocean's First, and you start from there.
That's how we do it, baby.
Yeah, that's it.
So who do you cast as a young Danny?
To go along with Reboot It, obviously it's Tom Holland, right?
It has to be Tom Holland or Jensen Ackles if he's available.
I work in, I try to get in Tom Holland or maybe like an Emil Hirsch.
I could actually see Emil Hirsch. I could squint and see it. Kind of like I can squint if I'm drunk at 3 a.m. and see Alden Ehrenreich as Han Solo. I can squint and see Emil Hirsch as Danny Ocean. But I would love that because the bummer is they did some weird. I know this show is not about Ocean's 8, but I just have to get this off my chest. They go that whole Ocean's 8 movie making you think that Danny faked his death and he'll pop out at the last second. And when it ends on a really weird, dour, melancholy, you would have loved this, bro, at his grave. And then it ends. You're like, what? What are you doing? What if he's truly dead? A, horrible choice. B, why did you bait me this entire movie that he was going to pop out? Every other character brings him up. And there's pictures of Danny all over the place, and people are like, oh, is that your dead brother? He's really hot. And she's like, yeah, I don't want to talk about it. Why bother? What am I missing?
I wonder if that was something where if we just put in enough references, George Clooney's got to say yes, right? And then he just never said yes.
And then they're just like, well, this is just too ingrained. We can't even take it out now.
We'd have to reshoot 67% of this movie.
It is very odd. It's, again, like all these Ocean's movies after 11, I feel like there's always one thing that I'm like, why'd you do that? That is Ocean's 8 of all the things in that movie, which I actually really like that movie. Putting dead Danny Ocean in, baiting you the whole time that he's just going to pop out at the end, and then he's really dead. You're like, what a weird way. I actually was really happy, and then you end the movie with a nut shot. Seems very strange. All these Ocean's movies are so strange, just in their own little collective universe. But you're right. You know what? 2001, Ocean's 11. I'm going to tell my children, yeah, you guys have the Avengers, but this was our Avengers before the Avengers. It
was so the Avengers. I can't believe everyone's in this film.
Yeah, and then you read they all took pay cuts, because later on I was like, how did they afford Ocean's 11? There's no way. Most films can't afford more than one of those guys in it, let alone all of them. They're all like, yeah, we'll just hang out in Vegas for a couple months, take a pay cut, and probably get some back end stuff. But yeah, I'm with you. I think unless it is the Avengers, you're not going to get this Avengers-esque cast together in a big Hollywood movie that is not a comic book, maybe ever again.
I have to agree with you. Absolutely. I mean, those Fast and Furious films are getting close, where it's like half of Hollywood. I think I might be in a Fast and Furious film at this point.
It's so funny because it's like now there's definitely a formula where it's like, oh, The Rock's not available. Who else? Who's a famous wrestler? John Cena? Okay, get him. Plug him in. You know, he's not available. Call Hulk Hogan. See what he's up to. That'll be Vin Diesel's dad. I guarantee you. I'm calling my shot. Hulk Hogan is Dom Toretto's dad. They will somehow find a way to do it. But Ocean's 12. There you go. I think it's a fun movie. So if you want to watch some Hollywood celebrities hang out and just have some fun for a couple hours, there it is. If you want to watch the Nerd Goat boys and myself hang out for a couple of hours, usually just one, but the Star Wars one went a little bit longer. Season 2 of Reboot It is happening. It's on YouTube only. You have to see it to believe it. So go over to the YouTube, the Reboot It channel. Season 2 is happening. Thank you guys so much for subscribing. Carlos, if once people are done, obviously, with this episode, because we want them to listen, I implore them, go over to Hey Do You Remember? Subscribe. Tell us a little bit about the show, just in case someone's jumping on, doesn't know what I'm being a prophet about.
Well, thank you very much. Hey Do You Remember is a podcast that I do with a couple of buddies of mine from a Starbucks we all used to work at. And we've been doing the show for, I think this is year 7 now.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't even think I knew what a podcast was 7 years ago.
I mean,
if I'm being honest.
Back then, I think it was pretty much like Mark Maron, Bill Simmons, Kevin Smith, and us, pretty much. And Adam
Good
Carolla.
company to be in.
But yeah, it's just a show we've been doing for about 7 years now, where we take movies and TV shows we grew up with, and usually the cutoff is 15 years or older, and we just review them and see if they hold up, what works, what doesn't. And there have been some real surprises for films that we're like, wow, didn't think that was going to hold up, or wow, that's actually better than I remember it. And there are a bunch that are like, we could never air that movie today.
Yeah, the one that The Good Son was one where I was like, I remember that movie being really dark and really great. And then I watched, I was like, oh no, I was just 12 and didn't know what dark and great meant.
And I remember like Problem Child being like, this is one of the big ones. One of the biggest surprises was we did Problem Child, and we remembered all the childish fart humor and stuff, and we watched it like, this is actually like really darkly satirical, and it's like a very good dark comedy that happens to star a child, and so it really worked for us.
Yeah, I absolutely love the show. I'm almost hesitant to push people to your show, because then they're going to realize a lot of the thoughts that I say probably stem subconsciously from things you, Donna, and Chris have said. Definitely, Chris, I have given him credit for the Mighty Ducks conundrum of the heightening is so out of order, with 2 being in the Olympics and 3 being prep school. Very interested. I'll have to get him back once the Disney Plus show launches. But Carlos, thank you so much for talking Ocean's 12 today. Check out Hey Do You Remember? Then head on over to YouTube, subscribe to the Reboot It channel. Thank you guys so much for sticking around for season 3 before D-Day, before I have to go and have a child, and who knows when we will be getting more episodes. So let's enjoy season 3 together. And thank you guys so much. I will see you one way or another next week.